Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Nerdy Up North podcast. This is the nerdy podcast of Ice and Fire. I've done the intro totally wrong again, but never mind. I'll get it right eventually. This is a podcast dedicated to the Song of Ice and Fire. I am one of your hosts. I am Sam number 1.
And I am Sam number 2.
And today's topic from the Wheel of Destiny was
House of the Dragon versus Game of Thrones, or vice versa, whichever one it is.
I would say Game of Thrones versus House of the Dragon.
Yeah, potentially. Yeah, but to be fair, it doesn't matter which way around it is, I suppose, for it, because it's not necessarily a list of what was great and what was bad comparatively between the two. I think it's just, especially from what I've done, is more a generalization between the two. Because it is very difficult to compare them, because obviously House of Dragon is only just one season.
Yeah.
It's not going to be 8 seasons long. If it is, that would be absolutely balmy, because I don't know what they're going to fill it with. So it's a case of, a lot of people do just season 1 versus season 1. I've done a couple of little bits in that, but I've done a bit more of a generalization, a bit, for things that are similar.
Yeah,
both of them.
I do like that. I'll do the disclaimer.
Oh, yeah.
I'll do that first, and then we'll get into it. I never forget it.
I get myself into so much trouble doing stuff.
Well, everything discussed in today's episode is our opinions and our opinions alone. If you would like to discuss anything from today's episode, please come and join us in the Facebook group, where we can have an open discussion. What we won't have is anyone come in for us and tell us our opinions are wrong. We can agree to disagree in fandom, so let's keep it fun, keep it kind, and keep the toxic behaviour out of nerdism.
Yes.
Ta-da!
Yes.
Right.
Are we still sticking with Bear and the Maiden, by the way?
No, we are not.
The Maiden, the Bear.
We are not. It does not work. I'm sorry. I just thought, I was listening to it back and I was like, no, that does not work. The Nerdy Up North podcast of Ice and Fire. I think we'll just
keep it simple.
Keep it simple. Keep it to what it is. But yeah, it just does not work. Like, I love the concept, but
we end up calling it something new each week, though.
I think that's going to be like the running joke, isn't it? And this week it's called.
I think so, yeah.
Right. Come on then, Sam number 2, kick it off.
Well, I mean, talking about sort of comparison, so again, how I kind of did it was things that I loved from both of them, but also things that appear in both of them as well. Okay. I do want to get one thing out of the way, which has annoyed me from Game of Thrones and still annoyed me in House of the Dragon, which is something completely random, very, very tiny, but it's just something that irks me, is the size of Balerion's skull. Because it appears in both of them, and it always pisses me off, because the way that they talk about Balerion, it was just the biggest thing to have ever lived. Arguably, Vhagar might have outgrown him, that sort of size. His skull should have been way bigger than what it is and what it appears as. And that came to me very, very late, because I was watching a scene where Viserys talks to Rhaenyra in front of Balerion's skull with all the candles, and I was just sat there. I didn't even pay attention to what they were talking about. I'm just like, that's not right. It's not right.
You're so icked by the fact that the dragon's head should have been a lot bigger.
Yeah, because what they say basically is that apparently Balerion, with opening his mouth, a mammoth would have been able to just walk inside of it. I mean, that's ginormous. Like, that's bigger than how it appears. It's bigger than what it is in Game of Thrones, because in Game of Thrones it's on the floor and Eye is like taller standing up than it's like his mouth almost. And it's like, that's not a big dragon. But I want to get that out of the way, because that's something that...
Nope, I like that. I like that starting point.
It's a tricky way to sort of begin, because it is quite a bit of a broken sort of thing, and again, coming back to it, there's only been one episode so far, and the comparisons,
it's hard because how do we compare a series of 8 that has such an established families with a series of 1 where we're only ever going to be focusing on one family?
Yeah, and that's the sort of thing that, well, potentially we could start with, is that House of the Dragon is way more centralized from the get-go. We very much focus on one area in particular, and we don't realistically deviate from that story or even place, because a lot of it is in King's Landing and some of the offshoots somewhere else, but again, still got the same characters. Whereas Game of Thrones, I think and I think this has been done on purpose as well, is that the reason why it's not as centralized is because the story for House of Dragon is going to be the Dance of Dragons,
Yes.
which is a Targaryen civil war for all intents and purposes, whereas Game of Thrones had to build a much bigger story. And I think that lends to both positives and negatives for it, because the very start, Game of Thrones can be a bit slow at times, and you suddenly branch off to somewhere that has nothing to do with the story that you've just watched. Whereas House of the Dragon, no matter what you do, where you go with it in the episodes, it's to do with the main story. Always to do with the main story. And it's a bit of a bad thing, because to a degree, because if you don't necessarily like that, or there's one aspect that you don't like about House of the Dragon, you're not going to enjoy any of it.
That's true. I think House of the Dragon, with its characters, had them fleshed out very quickly than what Game of Thrones did. But Game of Thrones had they had the, what's the word I'm looking for? They had time and
to do it,
they had time and space to do that. Whereas we had to know about this family pretty much straight away. And I don't feel like anything was rushed, even in one series, when it comes to House of the Dragon.
Not particularly. I think that maybe the only sort of rushing, I think, is rushing into it, because it's almost like with Game of Thrones, when you see a character in there, you 100% get who they are, what they're about, everything like that, and then that's where their character arc can develop from there. Whereas with House of the Dragon, it's very much a case of, right, we half know what this person's about because from their swagger and everything like that. And I think that the characters are very chop and changing. Take Daemon, for instance. 1 second he's an absolute sweetheart and he's doing something nice, and the next second he's an absolute monster, but he's always portrayed as the wild boy and everything like that. And it's hard to sort of gauge, because you don't quite, I don't get me wrong, I don't mind it at all. But some characters, even the main ones, it's almost like we should already know who they are, what they're about, and everything like that.
Yeah.
Whereas other characters will develop a bit slowly throughout the progression. They'll have more of a character arc anyway.
Yeah. I think Daemon is just an absolute fantastic character to watch throughout the whole of House of the Dragon. His progression arc is just so superb. He's like a complex villain. Like, we all understand why Daemon is the way he is, but when he shows them tender moments, it's like, oh. Yeah, well, but then in the next breath, he's taking someone's head off. Like,
exactly, it's the bad boy sort of thing, though. And this is a comparative between the two. Is that the main bad boy is not necessarily someone that's hated, because we have other characters for that.
Yeah.
But as far as bad boys that have a potential, because you can always tell from a get-go when a bad boy has the potential to go good, because that's how they portray them, and you can tell a character arc is almost incoming. And
Jamie.
Exactly. Jamie Lannister is basically Daemon of House of Dragon for the most part. I think that
for the most part,
sinister through some parts.
Daemon's issue is his loyalty. He's so loyal, like incredibly loyal. Like, the way he was with his brother was out of loyalty to him. He wanted to be his heir because he knew his brother better than anybody. He didn't want to take it away from him. Did you know? Like, he never wanted the throne for himself while his brother was still alive. The way he is with Rhaenyra when they get married, like, Jesus Christ, do not speak ill of that woman, because you will lose your head.
But I think the sort of difference between the two bad boys of the shows, the bad boy good character arc sort of thing, is that Jamie's very outward with what he wants. Whereas with Daemon, he's more sneaky with it, because he has his own desires, but will pass it off as a very good thing. Take the marriage to Rhaenyra. He kind of whispers in Viserys' ear almost. I mean, he's lying flat on his back with a knife to his throat, but he's still worming it a little bit to get Viserys to come round with it, because he's wanted Rhaenyra before it even made sense to have Rhaenyra.
Oh, that scene with them two made me so uncomfortable.
Is that the
younger self?
Which one? Because there's
it's the younger Rhaenyra when they're in the brothel.
Oh, in the brothel, yeah.
Oh, it makes me so uncomfortable.
And because this is what I don't get as well. It's something that, because I was watching along with a friend. We'd watch the episode and then we'd talk about it straight away afterwards. She was almost, because she used to stay up to watch it on a Sunday night. I didn't watch it until Monday morning because I'm not waiting to watch something 2 o'clock in the morning. So she'll be forcing me to watch it. I'll be watching it and she'll be on about Daemon and all this sort of thing. I'm like, hang on a minute, this man's basically groomed a little girl. We don't quite, because of the time skips, which I'll come back onto in a second, because of the time skips, you don't quite gauge exactly how old Rhaenyra is.
No, you don't.
That's, I think, the issue. Because you also don't gauge how old Daemon is.
Or Alicent Hightower.
Or, I think, I think she's a little bit older than Rhaenyra, but exactly the same sort of point.
Mm-hmm.
And again, with the sort of time jumps, is that you don't quite get the chance to always reflect on what's happened and where things sort of might go. And it's a bit, it was done, don't get me wrong, it's probably the time jumps have probably been done the best because of how continuous they were. I think the time jumps were done very, very well. I think the only issue with those time jumps, though, was that between episodes, obviously, apart from the character change, because then you grasp, okay, there's been probably a good 10 years or so that's passed now. But before that, you're almost like, okay, where are we at now? You get it very quickly almost, but you don't. You
do have to stop for a minute and go, all right, okay, this is where we're at. And I don't think it helped that the changing characters made no sense, because if what's his face wasn't walking around with an eye patch on, I would have thought he was the other brother.
Yes, yeah, and I think that's where they potentially not messed up, but I
think it's going to play out. I think the fact that he is, I think the older version of him, I can't think of his name. Is he? God, I cannot think of the guy's name. The one with the eye patch on.
Do you mean
one of Aemond?
Yeah, Aemond.
Aemond. So Aemond is the king. No.
Ares.
No, because he said, I'm sure he said he's the name of the conqueror, and he has the conqueror's
sword.
Aegon,
sorry. Yeah, it's Aegon. He's like Aegon the second. Aegon the second.
House of the Dragon. Let's see.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, Ares is Aegon the second.
Because that was one of the clips I saw where Otto Hightower was yes, he carries the conqueror's sword. Still not king though, is he?
Yeah, I think that the sort of issue where you mentioned there is because Ty Tennant, who played a younger Aegon II,
looks like him.
Yeah, exactly. Looks more like, because he's very taller, skinnier, sharper features. So it did get a little bit confusing, but again, you get it very, very quickly, and you're okay with it straight away, because the acting is same as in comparison to Game of Thrones, is phenomenal.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I can't find his name. But we all know who we're talking about. I think the guy who plays him now with the eye, he is perfect. Like he is so menacing, but at the same time, I don't think this is what I want to go on to as well, is villains. So in Game of Thrones, you have very much, your villains, your Joffreys and your Ramsays, and they're very much like, this is an absolute bastard of a person. But within House of the Dragon, you've kind of got to make your own mind up, because my villain could be very different from your villain. Yeah. I absolutely hate Alicent Hightower. I think she is the biggest villain out of the whole thing. I feel sorry for her. See how it differs. Exactly, I think that she is the biggest villain walking. She would have killed Rhaenyra if she had the opportunity when she was trying to take an eye for an eye.
Yeah, and this is the sort of, again, the difference in the two. Because yes, the acting is phenomenal in both of them.
Oh.
It is. I'm sorry, but House of the Dragon is just as good acting wise. And again, for those that don't know, Paddy Constantine, who played Viserys, George R. R. Martin said to Paddy that he played a better Viserys than George R. R. Martin wrote. And
what a
for someone,
compliment!
for a writer, especially of the caliber of George R. R. Martin, with what he's created and what he's done, to say that about one of his own characters, phenomenal. Because Paddy Constantine is by far everyone that I knew that I was talking to regarding House of the Dragon, they were all chiming on about Rhaenyra, Millie Adcock and Emma Darcy, and then obviously you've got Matt Smith as Daemon. Everyone was going on about those sort of people, whereas I could not take my eyes off Paddy Constantine because he was just phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. Because as far as a king goes, Viserys as well, you're at the height of the Targaryens' power. And wealth, all this sort of stuff. They have the most dragons they've ever had, and so he's not the greatest king, but he's still a nice king. He
wasn't the worst king. Let's put it that way.
Yes, he definitely was not the worst king.
He was not the worst Targaryen king, but he was for a king, he was too kind.
Yes, he let a lot of things slide for the sake of peace. Where he shouldn't have. I mean, don't get me wrong. If which comes into effect, right? It's one of his last scenes when he walks up to the thingy to decide on Driftmark's succession. That was again pinpointing what Viserys was about. That once he'd made up his mind about something, that was that. Yeah.
Oh God, yeah. Like he did not differ at all on Rhaenyra's succession. That was in his head. That was happening.
Well, but also Lucerys's succession to Driftmark as well. It was exactly how it is. But that's exactly how George R. R. Martin wrote him as well, is that he was too kind, and people took the piss a little bit with that.
I don't think his daughter ever did, though. I don't think she.
No,
I don't think
Rhaenyra's
ever. I think she generally had a lot of affection for him. I mean, our mother's death obviously tore her right up.
Yeah.
But I think she I mean, look at the fact that them two had such strain, and she hated it when after our mother died because of the decision he made.
Yeah, definitely. And I think this is where House of the Dragon has something that's I'd say probably a bit up on Game of Thrones, is the emotion, because we're sticking with one particular family and one particular storyline. The emotions that are sort of felt and the emotions that are seen can be brought to the forefront a little bit more, because we're not having to chop and change between different people. Yes, integral scenes in Game of Thrones obviously we focused on, but as far as the character's emotion, not our emotion, but the character's emotion, it surpasses Game of Thrones. That talk that Viserys and Rhaenyra have about Emma's death, the angry emotion when Rhaenyra finds out that he's going to marry Alicent instead as well, and at the very end.
Oh, that end scene.
After it's not.
Is it their acting was.
It is Viserys, I think.
Yes, it is. It's
I'm sure it's Viserys. Yeah, because Viserys is the youngest out of the two brothers.
Oh, he's such a sweet boy as well.
He
such
is
a sweet boy.
Naive, maybe, but the pain, like Emma Darcy, like you see it in her eyes, you see it in every fibre of her being, the hurt that she's feeling, how sad she is, and also how angry she is, all in one go. You see it all.
You don't even see the hurt in her face. You see it as she walks to the fire and she kind of loses her balance a little bit. And then she turns around and you've just got nothing but fucking anger. And you know there is going to be a war now. She said in front of that table which is amazing, a Dragonstone?
Yeah, they're at Dragonstone, yeah.
She said I won't strike first. I will. And I thought that was a really smart move, because it means whatever she does next is on retaliation of what they do.
Yes, yeah. And going back to, I think this is again where it differs so much from Game of Thrones, because there's not really a standout moment or scene realistically until potentially season 8, apart from Cersei, but who really knows what Cersei's feeling? Yes, she loved her kids, but she also wanted to be queen.
Yeah, that was Cersei. She has a very, for all we think she's incredibly complex, is our Cersei. She's very one-track mind.
Yes, yeah, she has a lot of things on the go, but as far as exactly, she's very, very one-track mind. And again, I think that's potentially the only sort of realistic emotion that we see, as far as focusing on the emotion, because of so much more chopping and changing between storylines. Again, for me personally, until we get to season 8, where Jorah dies in Daenerys' arms, and you see Daenerys break
for the first time in a very long time.
Yes, for the first time in a very long time since Khal Drogo, because after the Khal Drogo sort of thing, she was nothing really, and she had to live in Viserys' shadow, and then all of a sudden she becomes Khaleesi. Everything's fine. She's pregnant, and the next thing she's not pregnant, and she's also lost her husband, and also literally everyone except Jorah. And
Jorah
I think that's as far as sheer emotion, because even with a lot of the deaths that you see and that sort of thing, you don't really focus on the emotion of how a character's properly feeling. You kind of get the sort of gist instead, like when Ned Stark was beheaded, probably with Robb Stark and Catelyn's reaction, but it's only a very brief moment. That isn't.
Yeah, they kind of get over death very quickly.
Yes, whereas
it's almost like they're used to it.
Yeah, whereas with House of the Dragon, it encompasses for a few episodes. I mean, Kristen Cole has still been bitter for about 6 episodes of the season.
Oh my good God, the man who does not age.
Well, no, he got a bit of a beard on him.
I'm sorry. He grew some facial hair.
But yeah, I think that's where. I mean, think about it, I didn't go through and like with notes or anything like that and just kind of go, "Oh, Game of Thrones won this and House of the Dragon won this." But at some points, I think it's important to mention that because it highlights other things about the seasons and series as a whole. Because again, House of the Dragon is not going to be probably more than 2 or 3 seasons. The next season could be the last season.
Yeah, we don't, because it's not the biggest of stories. I wish I had the book. The book makes it look massive, but what you've got to take out of the book is everything else in between. You have the whole Targaryen. I gotta put my teeth back in. Targaryen dynasty in there, and the Dance of the Dragons is about this big.
It's almost like the second age of Middle Earth, almost. And what a lot of people had a problem with Rings of the Power is that although they didn't have a lot of rights, etc., that's a whole different conversation. There's not much to go on anyway.
Yes,
whereas
that's absolutely right.
With the Dance of the Dragons, you can kind of get the gist of it because it ends in a Targaryen civil war because Rhaenyra and Aegon are fighting for the throne. Therefore, it's a lot easier to fill in the blanks. It spans probably like 5 to 10 years, I think, off the top of my head, probably less. Whereas, Lord of the Rings, it covers the second age is, 3,000 years, whatever it is.
Wow, so that's a lot of years.
Exactly where a lot of differences are, sort of thing, and it can be kept a bit more close knit. I think that what is maybe a bit of a downfall for for House of the Dragon compared to Game of Thrones, though, just so there's even it up a little bit, is characters. Because of how sort of the pacing is perfect for what House of the Dragon is.
Yes.
And really, really perfect. However, in that, it's not necessarily going to have. It doesn't mean it's perfect all round. It just means that for what it is, it's got perfect pacing. To clarify that for everybody.
Yes.
But regarding the characters, I really, we've shown it already on this podcast that with the names, it's a struggle at the best of times.
Oh my God, the Targaryen names are like, you just add a Suri in the end. The Suri. Yeah. and you've got in it, apart from Joffrey, which I could not stop laughing at when they mentioned Joffrey Targaryen. Sam, you disappeared for a second.
No, it was me. Sorry.
Do you know what though? No one would have been able to see it because the camera would just been focused on me, and I just made a whole big deal about nothing.
Way to call me out in front of you.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry. But yeah, Joffrey Targaryen. Why am I struggling to say Targaryen tonight?
Should we just call them the T's? Should we just go for Black Sword?
House of the T. Oh my God. Did I ask you at the beginning what? Not the beginning of this podcast, but at the beginning of our first, did I ask you if you were House Black or Green?
Oh, I think you did, yeah. And I can't remember what I said. I mean, I'm siding more with Black. I'm siding more with Black because Aegon's a snivelly little turd.
Yes.
Otto, even though again he's fantastic, and what's his name?
Rhys Fiennes. Absolutely. I'm very sorry for the Welsh if I have butchered his surname, but he is so fantastic as Otto, but I still hate that character. But that's just the character.
That's a great actor. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, absolutely. I hated the fact in oh God, what's the throne room? What's it called in King's Landing? The throne room, the Red Keep, and all that. You can see all of the changes in the architecture where the high towers have gone in and put the fucking sun in there. But then you can also see it in Game of Thrones as well. It's also there too. And I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah, you
attention to detail.
Exactly. But again, attention to detail across the both of them is fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. And I think one of the best attention to details comes in the cinematography of House of the Dragon and Game of Thrones as a whole. Early seasons of Game of Thrones, the cinematography isn't as that. It feels more realistic, and I think that's the charm that it has.
It feels more fantasy. The first series of Game of Thrones feels like you are in this fantasy world. Like it feels like for me, I'm watching that. Like at some points, I'm thinking they're going to Shire. Like when Robert and Ned are sitting in a field, like it's just the quality of what you're looking at is just, it's high fantasy. As the season goes on,
you imagine yourself there though. That's the difference between the two, because with House of the Dragon, I said it as soon as I saw the tournament just before Emma gives birth to
the Tawny,
the child that King for a Day or whatever Damon calls him. Prince for a Day, something I can't remember.
Something it was.
Everyone forgets that. Everyone forgets,
and it was really I didn't think it was as bad as what everyone made out of, but they took a massive insult to it. It
was the circumstance that Damon was in, but when it was that tourney where Kristen Cole does defeat Damon, it feels like a film. The cinematography throughout House of the Dragon, and I think this is what they've learned from Game of Thrones, because towards the end of Game of Thrones you felt less like you could just simply walk into it and like you basically you're in the same sort of room. It takes away from that, because at all times of House of the Dragon I never felt that I could walk through my TV and nothing would change at all. It would still be the exact same screen, but again with House of the Dragon you don't feel that. And that bridge scene in episode 2, I think, 2 or 3, where you've got the Hightowers and the King Guard, well, you've got Otto Hightower and the King's Guard, and you've got Damon with the egg, because it's after he's stolen the egg. And then you see Rhaenyra flying on Syrax, land on the bridge, and it is one of, I mean, the scene that anyway, all the fog and the way it looks, phenomenal, and you kind of know the grandeur of it. And I think that's potentially a little foreshadowing thing, because obviously we're going to have fighting dragons. You need to have a good basis for grandeur shots.
Absolutely. The thing is with House of the Dragon, it has to replicate Game of Thrones in a way. Everything from House of the Dragon has to be reminiscent of what you've seen in Game of Thrones. This is not like a completely, I know that we've all had a bit of a falling out, and George R. R. Martin had a massive falling out with the showrunners from Game of Thrones, but this is part of that universe. They're not separating it. The opening credits alone tells you it's not separated.
It's the same,
which I really wish it had its own.
Yeah, this is the sort of half issue with it, and I think that as we get into season 2, which I'm gonna hope. Well, I hope I don't die on this sword, but I will fall on this sword of. I think season 2, with the progression, is going to be more spectacular than any season of Game of Thrones we've seen, as far as what season 2 is about. I mean, come on now, we've got fighting dragons, and we're going to have an actual, because early seasons of Game of Thrones, we had wars, but we didn't actually see them happening. If you cast your minds back, we usually see the end of one.
I'm just looking for something. Sorry if my head is pointed down. I got the date of House of the Dragon season 2. It will be released June 2024.
Oh no!
Well, come on, you can't just bang it out in another year's time. We didn't.
Well,
we waited nearly 4 years for one of the series of Game of Thrones.
Did we?
Oh, was it season 7?
We only waited 6 months for season 7 to season 8. That might have been why it was a few years.
There was definitely one, because I remember all these people catching up with Game of Thrones, and we had waited so long. I think my parents was one of them.
I think it was 2. I don't think 2 maybe going into 3. I don't think it was as long as 4.
No, it definitely wasn't, because I was watching it at the time. I'm sure it might be 4 going. It might be 5 going into 6, or 4 going into 5. But we waited a very long time.
I think it was I think it was either 5 into 6 or 6 into 7. I'm pretty sure. I'll get it up on IMDb now.
There was do you know what? There was an actual period of time when I thought season 7 was the final season, and me and my best friend were sitting watching the last episode of season 7 going, hang on a minute. This cannot be ending like this, can it? And we had to go on the internet and ask people, and like, oh no, there's another season. I was like, okay, because that wouldn't have made any goddamn sense.
Yeah, it was. No, it was 2 years between seasons.
2 years. Well, that's a massive exaggeration of 4 years.
Oh, hang on a second. No, 15th of April. July 20. Yeah, it was nearly 2 years between season 7 and season 8.
Because that was it. Yes, because my parents caught up with it, and I remember putting a post up on Instagram to mock them, to say, now our watch has ended, and I was like, you've all caught up, yet I've had to wait this amount of time for this series to come out. 4 years isn't a massive exaggeration, but I knew it was a long time. It felt like 4 years.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of get it with House of the Dragon, because if we are moving into more of a VFX and CFX sort of environment with the dragons, I get it, because it's obviously going to be a lot less what season 1 was, which I think was stunning, the locations that we ended up going to, considering that when rather than in Game of Thrones, we caught up with characters halfway to somewhere and then they'd reach the destination, whereas in Game of Thrones, in House of Dragon, we at points were in the middle of nowhere for things like with the hunting lodge place.
Yeah,
we didn't have that sort of thing in Game of Thrones, and it was stunning.
It was absolutely beautiful. And to see the Iron Throne as it was meant to be seen, and how it actually affected people. Because in Game of Thrones, it is downsized.
Yes, but also it is a curse. There is a curse which Viserys fell ill to, cut himself on the throne,
yes,
to be king.
But that was Aegon's aim, was no king should sit comfortably, and to see all of the swords actually around the throne was fantastic.
I think it was fantastic to see bigger, because it was a bit underwhelming to a degree in Game of Thrones. I get why, but for me, I don't think, with all the swords coming down, I think that the throne should have been it should have been a bit higher up.
Well, I think that is the actual true form of the throne. It is higher up, but because obviously logistics and cameras and us as viewers seeing it, I don't think they could do it as high as what they wanted to. I'm sure it is meant to be higher up, but I always felt like with the throne in Game of Thrones, I feel like Robert made that Robert edged, like sanded all those knives, like them swords down, and made it to where it was a smooth sitting. Whereas
smooth sitting, I think, but I think that getting rid of most of the swords, but also maybe making it a little bit more comfortable, probably comes from another Targaryen. I mean, Robert Baratheon would have made it more comfortable for himself anyway because of who Robert Baratheon is.
Would have been nice to see Robert sit on it.
Yeah, we don't really sit on it. No, but I think that might have been again foreshadowing that realistically he never wanted to be king. People don't really see him as king. Maybe something to do with that.
True. I mean, we saw Tywin sit on it a lot.
But to be fair, Tywin was the man. And that's who Otto Hightower is in House of the Dragon. There are a lot of similarities, which I think is done particularly on purpose, because it allows us to, even though it's different, it allows us to connect. Because even King's Landing, even Dragonstone, they're still different. They look different because we are 200 years before Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
And I think that those sort of similarities, whilst I think it's sometimes a bit of a lazy trope, I think in this situation it lends its hand really, really well, because we have those similarities to draw back on. Because obviously at the time of Game of Thrones, we only have 2 living, well, at the very start of it, we have 3 living Targaryens. One we don't.
Oh God, yeah, John.
Targaryen. Yeah. Well, no. Mace Aemon.
Mace Aemon. Oh yes.
The ones that we know fairly early on are Targaryens. There's 3. We've got Viserys, Daenerys, and Mace Aemon. And obviously we only have 2 by the end of it anyway. Whereas we have more Targaryens, not massively. Saying that, I think there is only a couple that are properly around anyway.
Yes.
In their House of the Dragon, because there are more that exist, they're just not prominent figures. So
they're not. No, and you see Velaryons as well. A lot of
we see Velaryons for the first time. They exist in the time of Game of Thrones, but
they are a lower house.
Yeah, which might have something to do with what has happened towards the end of
thingy. Potentially.
Because if you think about it, what's his name? Corlys.
Yes, Corlys Velaryon.
Daemon. They're both dead.
Corlys is not dead.
Not Corlys. Well, no, but
his brother.
He's old though.
He is old, but how fantastic does he look though?
Oh, he's
oh my God, he is such a
brilliant.
Oh, visually that man looks fantastic.
They're almost akin to the Targaryens of keeping their sort of their looks throughout their bloodline. They just look fantastic.
All of them. I love how all of them, the grandchildren, Daemon's wife, the one who set herself on fire, the look of them is so consistent, and just you can just feel like the Valerian side in there. It would have been class if it would have been class if either the Valerians or the Targaryens had purple eyes. I'm sure Daenerys is described as having purple eyes.
Yes, there's some also Targaryens that are described with purple eyes, but Daenerys is more described as having purple. Yeah, again, that's a bit of a pain in the ass production-wise, I think, for having purple contacts in and looking a bit more fake-ish regarding.
They can fake blood splatter. They can fake an eye color. I'm just saying.
Purple. As far as I think realistic, because with Game of Thrones they wanted to keep the sort of realism, the feel anyway, because it's not until. Yes, we have White Walkers and dragons in there.
No, I totally understand that. And if they wanted to keep to the realism of it, should have burnt her hair off when she was in the pyre, like she does in the book. That really bothered me. I was like, her hair's fireproof, but nothing else.
I think it might have got a bit confusing though, if she went into the fire and out pops Sinead O'Connor. That would have been.
I think it would have been fantastic if she came out with a bald head. It would have made the vulnerability in season 2 more painful to watch, because that was at her lowest point. was when she was walking through the wastelands and she was heading to Karth. Oh my God, I can't believe I'm saying these names right. And she was incredibly vulnerable. Having her with no hair in that position would have just brought on so much more sympathy for her as a character, even though at the time she very much had my sympathy. I was a big Daenerys fan until she decided to sit on her hands and just do absolutely nothing.
Yeah, and I think that's something that House of the Dragon isn't going to falter in, because it's going to be a shorter format anyway, and because of season 2 is going to have more action, and again gripping action, because it's either going to be hot shit, or it's going to be
a hot mess.
Yeah. You know, and it is. But I don't think that House of the Dragon will fare with that, because of it's a shorter format, and because we're more centralized with the story.
Yeah.
Because even with Game of Thrones, even with wars going on, we're dipping off to the Wall, we're then dipping off to the rest.
Yeah, exactly. The Wall has its own story. King's Landing has its own story. The Riverlands have their own story. Like, there's so much going on in all over the place. And I bought a map. I actually have a Game of Thrones map that used to be on my wall, so I knew where I was. But in House of the Dragon,
never explained.
No, it's not. But House of the Dragon, you literally are centraled in one place. I also love in House of the Dragon that the Lannisters aren't shit. Even though I love my Lannisters, excuse me, I love that they are not shit at all. Nobody cares about them.
I mean, that's something that I think is a positive and a negative, because keeping up with the names of characters has been difficult in House of the Dragon, as far as, because there are a lot of characters that pop up a couple of times, but when they pop up the second time, you tend to forget their name. Whereas I think the good part of it is, because they're not integral to the story, we don't need to know.
We don't
yet, anyway.
We are aware that the Starks, the Baratheons, the Tully is her mother's house. She said her mother was a Tully.
Who?
But the Lannister, so the guy who plays the Lannister, this blew my mind.
Hang on a second. Who are you on about? That
Rhaenyra. I'm sure Rhaenyra's mum was half Tully.
Oh yeah, Emma's from somewhere in the.
She's not a Targaryen. He didn't marry a Targaryen. I don't know.
Or Blackwood? No, not Blackwood. I can't remember.
I'm sure she said when she was dishing out because I've watched a lot of videos this week.
I think.
Aaron, that's it. Sorry, I was thinking of Catelyn's sister. She was a Tully. It's Aaron who she married. That's right. Wow. Okay. But the guy who played the Lannister in House of the Dragon is also in the first episode of Game of Thrones.
Well, there's two.
Who's the other one?
There's two Lannisters. They're brothers, aren't they? And this is the problem, is that you don't.
What?
And you can't even remember their names either.
Which one? So the guy who's at the tourney in season 1 of Game of Thrones, I think he gets murdered. He is also the Lannister in House of the Dragon.
There's two. There's Jason and Tyland.
There's two. So he's a twin.
They're twins. Yeah, they're twins.
Oh my god.
They're both.
So it's not the same actor.
The more annoying. No. What's more annoying as well is that they're both played by the same actor. And this is, I think, this is where it gets a bit confusing, because with Game of Thrones, because the story is explained early on, where it very heavily focuses on who, because there's an important part that is quite integral to knowing who the players are, almost, is when Robert goes to Winterfell, is actually pointing out who the people are to Sansa.
Yeah, I noticed that when I watched it the other day, how quickly they are to tell the audience who everyone is.
And because they look so different as well, there's no sort of, because if you look at all the houses, there's kind of like one leader of the house, and then there's like one or two kids of each sex, potentially. Like with the Starks, yes, there's more children, but they're different sexes of different ages as well.
Yeah.
With the Lannisters, obviously there's only 3 kids, all entirely different, and it's very easy to tell them all apart. Whereas when it comes to House of the Dragon, you're introduced to a lot of different people, a a lot of different families that you don't know of as well,
Mm-hmm.
because they don't exist at the time of Game of Thrones, or they're just no longer really an important family anymore. And like with the Jason and Tyland thing, you don't realise until they say their own names. And I think that's what loses it a little bit. If a character has to say their own name for you to remember who the hell they are.
Are we talking about the same person here? Who are we talking about?
You're talking about the Lannister that tries to propose to Rhaenyra.
Yes, I am. Sorry. Yes.
I'm pretty sure that's So Jason's the arrogant one,
Mm-hmm.
from memory, and Tyland is the more nicer, I suppose.
Right. Okay.
But he's very cunning.
I've been to work for 10 hours today. My brain is fried. So that really confused me there for a second, but I am now on the same page. Also, just a side note, has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but it's House of the Dragon. The twins in House of the Dragon took me ages to realize that is Carl from Shameless.
Oh, that's Eric and Arik.
Yes. Took me. I absolutely love them, actually. I think they're actually really good characters. But I was like, why do I know that face?
I
know the face,
God,
I know the voice.
So annoying. I think I did exactly the same thing as well. I was like, he sounds, because obviously his voice is slightly different. It's like, it sounds slightly familiar, in his face I can almost picture it. And then when you get it, it's like, God, how could I have ever thought it was anybody else?
I can't not see him now. I've seen clips of him talking to Rhaenyra, and I'm like, of course, that is like, is it Carl? Well, they both played Carl in Shameless, but one of them then went off to Emmerdale. The other one stayed in Shameless. But then I get really confused between the two of them. When it comes to identical twins, they are really fucking identical.
If I'm being brutally honest, I thought the other one was an entirely different actor, not related to whatsoever.
Really? They are so identical.
I've got no idea. When it comes to Carl and stuff, I only know one Carl from Shameless.
Both played him. So you don't know.
Exactly, not a clue. But that's again where I think it's a bit easy to tell, because both of them are in the sort of they're in more shots together as well. So you know that, yes, the names are similar, being Arik and Eric.
Their mum really thought out the box with that one, didn't she?
But that's where I think it is more obvious for something like that. Whereas something like Jason, even though the background characters, it's still important in a show to fully get who, even side characters, if you've seen them before, realistically, unless it's like once really randomly, you should be able to tell, okay, this is, especially within one season.
Yeah.
You should be able to get, oh, that's that person. Happy days.
Yeah.
But you just don't.
Yeah.
Until they mention it, which takes away from it, because yeah.
I think with House of the Dragon is lost my train of thought already. Oh my god. No, what was I going to say?
Night, by the way, people, it's like 9 o'clock at the minute when we're doing it.
And I've been to work for like 10 hours today. But I'm off tomorrow, so I should not be complaining. But what was I going to say? Oh yeah. House of the Dragon season 2 is going to be absolutely fantastic. I know this, you know this. I feel like we all know this. However, if you are a massive Game of Thrones fan and you have paid close attention to the dialogue that runs through that series, you will know how this ends.
Yeah, that's
it's said by Joffrey how this ends.
Yeah, it's a bit of a catch-22, to be honest, because we more than anything know how it's going to end. It's more kind of, we're anticipating seeing how it all comes to fruition, because a couple of the characters we are meeting for the very first time, that their names have never been mentioned before. Whereas again, I think that's why some of the ratings are not as obviously as high as Game of Thrones, because of things similar to that. Game of Thrones had a lot of different things to follow at once. If you didn't like one storyline, you could almost forget it or skip it because it didn't really matter at some point.
Beyond
House of the Dragon, you can't skip because you're going to miss integral things. We've had brief mentions of how already in Game of Thrones of how it's going. And this is where it kind of transcends, because book people they'll always know what's going to happen in a film or TV show 9 times out of 10 anyway, because they have source material there. Whereas, especially with me, I am not a book reader. Therefore, I'm focusing on what's going on TV wise.
Yeah, it was infuriating. I was a Walking Dead comic reader, and it was so infuriating when especially for my husband, and this is probably why he didn't watch it after like season 6 or something, is because I knew what was coming. I knew exactly what was coming, who was coming, why was coming, how it was going to go down, and he hated that.
I think it takes away from His Majesty, because I've always preferred, much to my family's dismay as well, because my family are big book. Like, I'll mention one thing in particular, Poldark. So it's quite an old book now. It was a BBC One.
I think my mum watched this.
Yeah, with Aidan Turner. It's a historical sort of like drama set in late 1700s Cornwall. And the books are, my grandparents had read the books and fell in love with the books, and they loved the first couple of seasons of Poldark because it is very sticking to the book. As it got on, my grandparents were almost like, no, we're just not even going to bother watching it because it's just not the same. We absolutely hate it. And I'm sat there going, I love it, because I've never read the books. I'm like, I love this so much.
I think over time I've managed to separate digital media from literature. I feel like I've had to. I'm a person who will read after the fact. I am not a trendsetter, so I am not going to read it before everyone else. I am going to read it after the fact. Harry Potter is a massive one. I just read them last year, all of them. And if anyone saw my TikTok this morning, my reading challenge for this year is Game of Thrones. I am going to take on. I know exactly how many pages are in every single one of my Game of Thrones books. And I know that I can have this finished in a year if I read 15 pages a day.
That's not a lot, to be fair.
No.
Is that just that book, or is that?
Nope, that is the entire series. So someone worked out that there was so many pages and it would take 496 days to read the whole entire series, but you had to do it at a certain number of pages a day. My friend said, and she did all the math for us, if you read 15 pages a day from today to the end of year, you'll be finished. And I was like, that doesn't make it sound as daunting as looking at the size of this book and going, what? I have read the first one before, but because of this podcast, and because I want to be one of those people now, I want to be part of the book club.
The snobs.
Yeah, I want to be part of them. But I just want me conversations to be able to branch out just a tiny bit more. I don't want to be like, well, this has happened in the book and it didn't happen in the series. I want to understand these characters more than what I do from the show. Like I'm fully committed into getting immersed in this. I have used that word so many times today.
This is a good thing though, because especially if I've never read the books, maybe learning curve for Zion. Plus as well, when it comes to TV shows, I'll notice everything.
You are shit hot.
I'm just very observational when it comes to TV shows and linking things, and
that's why we're going to work so well together, because I am the type of person who has to watch something a million times. This is why I don't ever get to watch anything new, because I have to go back and watch over old stuff, because my memory is so bad that I will forget. And it's not, I have not forgot anything about Game of Thrones because of the amount of times I've watched it.
Yeah, it is. And I think I'm hoping that House of the Dragon stays as memorable, because it's going to be the first time sort of TV wise that we see something, and what I'm hoping that they do, especially if it's not coming out until bloody next year, June
2024. And if we are still doing this 2024, and if we are still doing this podcast next year, which I very much hope that we are, we will make a huge song and dance about House of the Dragon season 2.
Massive,
literally.
A good pun there is a good song and dance as well.
Wow, that's a good one.
Because I just hope it sticks, because I think it is. If their plans are there and what I think a lot of us are hoping for, it's going to be the first time that we see something like this, and it's not often from TV or film now where we see something that we've never seen before.
Yeah.
Very, very rare, and I'm hoping that season 2 has those elements of something we haven't seen.
Yeah.
Because
oh, sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, with dragons fighting, yes, we saw it in season 8, where Drogon took on Viserion.
He was dead though.
Viserion. Yeah, he was already dead anyway, but he was like,
he was dead. Like it was an easy fight.
it was it wasn't, because he was dead, so he just got back up.
True. but for Drogon, if you think about it, like, he's already dead. Can't get any more dead there.
Yeah. But I mean, Drogon couldn't do shit all anyway. Which was a shame, because
it was such a shame. I was so disappointed.
I know. Drogon's meant to be Balerion reborn. That's what Drogon is meant to be.
Because the black.
And I hope that if they still release, the black, the shape of him, the size of him, blah blah, he is supposed to be. And I'm hoping that if the snow stuff gets properly finalized and released, I really do hope that, like with House of Dragon, because there are things that do tie into Game of Thrones, I'm hoping that in Snow we actually see the return of Drogon, and he is a big boy, an even bigger boy. Because I'm hoping that they go wacky. I'm hoping they go really wacky and fun with it, to be fair, because why not? Because if I'm honest, after 8 seasons of watching Game of Thrones, if it's just going to be a continuation of, this is basically just what happened after.
Yeah, I'm not interested in Jon Snow on the other side of the wall. Like,
if he finds the origin of the White Walkers potentially, oh god, yeah.
Yeah, okay, I'll give you that, because that would be interesting.
Just wandering through the wilderness. Oh, look, I found more wildlings. No, we've already seen it when he went to go see Mance, and we've seen things like that already. I want to see things like with what House of the Dragon is doing, is things that we haven't seen before already. With Vhagar killing, I want to say Araxis again for some reason.
It was the smallest of dragons. Do you know what?
It was the smallest.
We will learn these names. We will.
We'll try to learn them.
We'll not just learn them, we'll be able to say them as well.
I will tell you the colour of each dragon.
We will. It was the smallest of dragons. Can I just point out how amazing Daemon's dragon looked? How different, how unique that walk was.
Araxis, the bloodworm.
Oh my god!
That's the reason. He's a deformed dragon. He's not an atypical dragon. He's not a typical dragon. He is an atypical dragon, because he is slightly deformed, and that's why they call him the bloodworm, because he has such a long reaching neck, and he is obviously red, and also he doesn't have the normal sort of dragon screech. He has more of a cry, and again, that's due to his deformity of his neck, and he sounds different. But this is why
they may call it deformities. I call it uniqueness. He was fucking spectacular to look at.
It was, and what was beautiful to see as well is more of the connection. Because yes, we got to see a connection between Daenerys and Drogon, Rhaegar, and
until she locked the other twos up, like,
not Rhaegar,
bitch. It's Rhaegar. Viserion? No, Viserion? Because they're all named after our brothers, aren't they?
It's Rhaegar, but our brother's name's Rhaegar. There's an L at the end of the dragon's name, I think.
Rhaegal.
Yeah, Viserion, right. And then it's not Viserys, it's Viserion, and then there's Drogon.
It's just what they do, isn't it? Targaryens, ins and O's and ongs and gongs.
It is
just added on the end.
It is, and their sort of relationship, and the sort of growing relationship that you see between Daenerys and Drogon in particular, because you've also got to remember is that when it came to Targaryens and their dragons, they'd bond with a certain dragon. When it came to Balerion, he was ridden by obviously Aegon the Conqueror. And then he was also ridden, I believe, by Maegor the Cruel. After that, it was by Viserys. And obviously Viserys was Balerion's last rider anyway. And Viserys didn't feel like he should bond with another dragon afterwards, so didn't. Same with Vhagar. Vhagar was one of Aegon's sister wives. Can't remember which one. It's not Rhaenyra or Rhaenyra. It's the other one.
Rhaenyra. Oh God, yeah, the crazy one. She is the reason that another Targaryen fight breaks out, and it's the same reason. Is that she wants her son on the throne instead of the actual heir. The Targaryens do not learn.
No, they really sort of don't. And obviously, that carries on for ages anyway. But I think that's where the love for me anyway is different with this show, is that you see one dragon with one person.
Yeah, that's their dragon.
You see that it's their dragon because you also see that they have like dragons that they have seats on their back. Yeah. You see the dragon pit as well when you've got the dragon, the handlers. And they have a specific name, I think. I can't remember.
That's what I was really excited about, was seeing the dragon pit in all its glory, because you see it really decayed and shoveled down.
If I'm honest, I don't want to see why the dragon pit gets left in ruins. Because that is going to be, I can tell everyone right now, that is going to be akin to watching the Red Wedding. Because, when Grey Wind was shot, and you're just like, that is heartbreaking. It's going to get even worse when you see 10 dragons pinned against a corner, not being able to do anything apart from one of them who tries to fly, hits the ceiling, comes crashing down and just lands on everyone. But you're talking little dragons.
Watching Daenerys lock up 2 dragons was bad enough. That broke my heart. I cannot. There is a couple of scenes I can't watch in Game of Thrones. That is one of them. When Ned Stark kills Lady, we'll never watch that scene ever.
Oh no!
Oh, it's awful. No. Absolutely awful. I can barely make out on the Red Wedding where Grey Wind gets shot. It's just my eyesight.
It's just a random thing that happens. It's when
he's going nuts, and then he's going nuts, isn't he?
Yeah, so it's as things start kicking off. I think Rob's already been shot up with the arrows, and then it's as the Hound arrives, Arya jumps off, runs through, and it's just as everything's kicking off. It's just before I think Rob gets shot, because they come out, kill the Stark guards, and Arya's like, and then she sees Grey Wind getting shot up as well, and then she's like, and that's when the Hound kind of comes and bonks.
Like, nope, we're going, kiddo.
He carries off because he knows what's sort of happening.
Did you see Rob Stark's direwolf sewn to his head? Because
yes, I missed it the first time watching.
I missed it the first time, caught it the second time, and thought I was tripping. I was like, I am not seeing that.
To be fair, we probably should have got it a little bit, because there's talks later on. So do you know when Arya randomly comes up to try and kill those people, and the Hound's like, you could have told me before you went to go kill them. Where did you get the knife? And Arya goes, oh yeah, it's yours. And he looks down and takes it and all that sort of stuff. Those people are actually talking about that they were the ones one of them saying, I'm pretty sure it is that I sewed the head onto.
I think I remember that.
Yeah. To be fair, it's difficult watching because it's a very, very dark scene in 2 different ways. So it's very emotional anyway.
But it's really dark.
It is a really dark, it's just lit by literally firelight.
Yeah, and that doesn't bode well for someone who's blind. Like, if I don't have my glasses on, and even if I have my glasses on, I still struggle to see sometimes.
Yeah, and I think this is. Don't get me wrong. When it comes to the sort of discussion that we've had so far about Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon, the sort of comparison, you can compare them. As far as things as a whole, I don't think, unless they smash. Well, obviously, I've not seen The Last of Us yet, but I know that that's good. I've not watched any of it yet because I want to binge watch it. I've never played the games either, so I'm just going basically off of the TV show, which I know I'm going to love anyway.
You are.
But I don't think it's going to have the sort of impact of Game of Thrones.
It's not.
The only thing that I think can come close to it is if they nail the Fallout TV series.
Okay.
Because again, that's going to be something that we haven't ever seen on TV before, as far as a proper, drawn-out, post-apocalyptic, caused by nuclear warfare, not just a virus has killed everyone.
Yeah, and it's proper world building, Could
It's
you class?
groundbreaking, and that's what Game of Thrones was. I think, as far as, not obviously the fantasy genre was the ground was smashed to smithereens when it came to the Lord of the Rings trilogy. As far
Absolutely.
as as far as TV shows go, it is the benchmark for a lot of things. I think moving forward, it's been 12 years since the first episode aired,
Jesus.
and because I think I'm pretty sure it was 2011. Yeah, 2011.
It was because
Um,
I didn't get it until we moved into our flat in 2012 and the Blu-ray was out, because that's how I watched it.
God, I love a
Was the
Blu-ray.
Blu-ray.
I watched it over a weekend, the first 4 seasons, because they were on BritBox or something. No, Now TV. They had the first 4 seasons, so I just sat and watched it all because I
My
caught
dad has
glimpses
them
on
all
Sky Atlantic.
my dad has them all recorded on Sky, like from his Skybox. And he literally, it's not like he went to the box set. He just went when they were playing, because they play on like Sky Atlantic all the time. He
Yeah,
just found the first episode, and just started recording from there and just put it on a series link, and he
God,
has them all.
that Skybox must be overheating like mad. There's no
Yeah, but
memory left on that.
if you honestly, my dad would watch them tomorrow on repeat, because again, I've mentioned this about my father. He doesn't get it, and he never will, but he loves being in that world.
That's the beauty of it, and I think that this is the beauty of House of the Dragon as well, is that even though, yes, it's a bit more fast paced, realistically, all you need to get is Viserys was king, he dies, succession problem, dragons. You don't need, yes, there are politics, but the politics involved, which I think has been done fantastic and arguably better than Game of Thrones, the politics of House of the Dragon
Tastefully, and
is so tasty.
not ramming it down your
And not as
throat.
violent either. Nowhere near
No.
as it's more like proper politics.
Yeah.
Well, for the most part.
For the most part, because it
Get your
is
tinfoil
fantasy.
hats on, ladies and gents. No, but and I think that that's where you kind of need to get it. The rest of the stuff in House of the Dragon is filler because it's not as important. It's just to progress the story on and just to fill in the little blanks anyway. But it's still a good watch because, again, you don't need to get the whole Targaryen history and all that sort of stuff because it focuses on the main points. Something that Lord of the Rings did incredibly well was that with all the history, the Hobbit came before it, all this sort of stuff, it tells you the history that you need to know. At the very start, it gives a good opener to kind of get you on track. Bearing in mind that it covers a very vast period, it just gets you on track, and you automatically feel like you're automatically caught up. And even little bits like Rohan and Gondor being, not liking each other. All you need is just a case of, oh well, Gondor weren't here for us, and you'd be like, yeah, fuck.
Oh, you don't like him. They don't like each other.
Yeah, it's
Sean
very,
Bean makes that very clear.
Yeah, well, yeah, definitely, and it's sort of things that are given to us that don't need to be in great detail.
Yeah.
But actually, I do want to mention something quickly because about the openers as well. Is that I would have liked a different opening to House of the Dragon because
I said that earlier.
Did you?
I did. I said the openings. I really wish that they were different.
Not the. You mean the credits, don't you?
I mean the.
Yeah, no.
What do you mean?
I mean the opening scenes. So I can't even remember what the opening scenes of House of Dragon are, but I know it's not what I wanted because in Game of Thrones, these sort of opening bits that we see is the end game, is the White Walkers.
Oh, I get what you mean now.
So I would have liked to have seen something because they've changed up Dragon Dreams to a little bit anyway. I don't think anyone would have been mad if the opening scenes were like dragons fucking fighting or about to fight.
Some
and then
form of
someone wakes up and it's a dragon dream. So you kind of half get what the end game is, but you don't quite know. And we
so sorry.
So I nearly did that. I about choked earlier. I don't blame you.
Dry throat.
Yeah, no, it's a pain. That's why.
If anyone can hear me drinking, I am so sorry.
I don't think it comes across. I'm probably sounding more like Mike Reed as the night's gone on. To be fair.
Yeah, my voice is starting to crack. Yeah, no, I totally get what you mean. It would have been great to see, like, not
just a little bit.
Yeah, just I totally get that, because that is the opening of Game of Thrones, is the end game.
You half forget it. You half forget it.
Well, I just did, and I've only just watched it the other day.
I mean, because you kind of get it at the start. I think that's maybe what put a lot of people off Game of Thrones at the start, is that, oh my god, it's just so fancy, because you greeted firstly with a man with glowing blue eyes, but it's like it puts it there in the back of your mind as you're watching, because you see, obviously, then it goes to Ned. You then get introduced to Ned and how he is properly. You don't see Family Man Ned. You see the right honourable Ned Stark.
I'm Ned Stark.
Eddard Stark. Sorry.
I'm sorry, Eddard Stark. Let's get his. We can say his name right.
Sorry, Eddard of House Stark. But things like that, we kind of get it, and it's always there in the back of your head, because then it goes back to it a little bit, and you only get a little snippet. And that's what House of Dragon does really well, is that you get a snippet of things to come as you see more and more dragons.
I know how the opening is for House of the Dragon. It is a recap. It tells you the two cousins.
That's where Jaehaerys choosing his thingy.
Yes, is succession needs choosing that, and obviously it goes to Viserys and not who Rhaenyra. Rhaenyra. It's very similar to Rhaenyra. Rhaenys. That's it. Rhaenys.
I think it's not Britain.
Who is fucking fantastic.
Oh my god,
I love that woman so much.
Just to interject quickly, the scene at the very end where she crashes in on the back of Meraxes. Pretty sure it's
Meraxes.
Yeah, Meraxes. Whatever it is. Shut up! It's a dragon. Everybody, be quiet. It's a dragon's name.
And it's a Targaryen one as well.
She bursts through the floor on the back of a fucking dragon there. Will that do it for you?
That'll do.
Always when Alicent stands in front of Aegon and the screech in her face, and Rhaenys is stood there like, you done fucked up, boys and girls. But it's not my war to start.
Right now.
Yeah, I have the power.
But I'm not gonna.
Yeah, exactly. You're high towers. You do not know the power of a Targaryen, but this isn't my war. This isn't my war to start. I've killed all these civilians, but this is your fault still. And then rides off. And so I go back to the opener. Sorry.
Yeah, that was the opener for it. It was giving you a backstory of where the Targaryens were. But I do feel like a Dragon Dream could have been put in there. And
at some point, because we could have gone.
It was very Lord of the Rings how they did the opening, by the way.
Yes, and don't get me wrong, I still loved it because it's introduced a character again like Jaehaerys, because Viserys is Jaehaerys the first grandson. Jaehaerys had the longest reign of any Targaryen. Jaehaerys was, I think, Aegon's grandson or great grandson or something like that. Anyway, so it was very a matter of succession, but I think that could have been done at a different time, because Rhaenys is still very bitter, and that could have been a flashback at a different time, no problem, because we don't realistically need to see at the start of the show immediately how
Rhaenys is pissed.
And yeah, because we can kind of, that's the whole thing I think of getting into characters and why they are that way, is that you have flashbacks or even things that the characters mention at different times, and that's why they're so annoyed. Like
that woman has so many bitter pills to swallow.
She does, but it's the same as Tywin, and we only realistically find out properly Tywin's emotion about why he doesn't like Tyrion, and then we find out that realistically Cersei's anger comes from, again, what Tywin thinks.
Yeah.
Because Tywin is very bitter, and the only reason he is bitter is because Tyrion wasn't a normal child. I say normal child, I'm not talking that,
Yeah, he wasn't Jaime, basically.
No, exactly. He wasn't another Jaime or anything like that. He wasn't another son that he felt that he could be majorly proud of. He basically had given, something that was deformed and not right, and also had killed his wife at the same time.
And Tywin is, if nothing, a perfectionist. He almost killed his own father because how much of a joke he nearly made the Lannister family. Like, he is such a perfectionist. So to have his son as Tyrion, it's just not good enough for him.
Titus.
Yeah.
Titus Lannister, yeah, he was walked over by every other lord and nearly lost basically everything.
And Tywin nearly made an example of him.
Yes. But yeah, I get what you mean, and it is just one of those, and we could have gone back to seeing why Rhaenys was properly pissed off, because at the start of the show, yes, we go from how Viserys has been crowned, and then yes, it kind of sets the tone as to why Rhaenys and Corlys Velaryon are a bit further adrift rather than being super close. But again, there could have been that flashback literally later on in the same episode.
Yeah.
Yeah,
you're right.
I think to see the end game would have, because of everyone's bitter taste that was left after the last parts of season 8. Because don't get me wrong, I don't particularly enjoy the last 2 episodes of season 8 anyway. I still watch them, don't have a major problem. Well, I do have problems, but not a major problem of just this is trash. But it still leaves everyone was left with a bitter taste in their mouth, and I think having a bit of a dragon dream to show a future of the Dance of Dragons properly, of a proper Targaryen civil war with armies and dragons, not it all happening, but just potentially almost like they're about to collide or something like that, and then bang,
we're in it.
Like, is it like it flashes back almost to how it all sort of began. And again, I know that's a bit of a trope that people don't like. You know what? I've never used that word in 10 years, and I've used it twice already today. Trope.
You tend to use a lot of it when you talk about horror.
That's true. That's true. Actually, that's very true.
Something I have learned through the podcast.
Very, very true.
So should we wrap things up? Because we've been talking for some time, and I'm getting tired.
Yeah, how long have we been? We've been going a good hour and a half.
5
minutes.
Do you know what though? Regardless if I'm tired or not, I can still fucking talk about this shit. So let's spin the wheel of destiny.
I should really have this up. I always forget to have it up, but let's spin anyway.
And see what next week's going to be.
Yeah, and this is the thing about the whole universe, though, that we talk about is it is just so. There's just so much.
Do you know what? If you actually angle that right, you may be able to see the wheel in your glasses.
Oh, could you? Yeah, apologies for people that watch. I should have anti-glare on this, but I don't. But the level that I am compared to my computer screen and all sorts, it just, unless I made this screen completely black and was talking directly at the camera, that's the only way you can see my eyes.
I think you would find that really uncomfortable, not being able to see my reaction. So
I think it would also me just staring, because I'd just be staring and an unwavering. Yeah, I don't think that'd be very good.
She scare people. She really takes this shit seriously.
I know. So this was actually something I added mid-episode, last episode.
Oh wow! Okay.
Because you mentioned something, I was like, "Oh my god, how have I not put that in yet?" Okay. It is another top 5. I've not even run this past you. This is a bit.
I'm fine. I'm fine with it.
This will go fine. I know it's going to go fine though, because I know you're going to love this. Top 5. It's another top 5. So buckle in, guys. It's going to be another long one. Top 5 satisfying deaths.
Oh, I am in this. I am in this.
Because this could be any death. We're talking any death, as long as it's satisfying to us and why it's satisfying. I don't
even need fucking research on this one. I can rattle these off.
But we're at a sort of level of, again, it doesn't matter whose death it is. It's just why it's satisfying to us. It could be the most random thing where you see someone get flung about, and it's just.
You are going to see the more sadistic side of me next week. Oh, I can't wait.
I think there was something that I remember watching not too long ago. It was probably not too long before you actually asked me to do this podcast. where there's actually a video that details pretty much every minor to major death in Game of Thrones.
Probably seen
hour
it.
and a half. It's like an hour and a half, 2 hour long YouTube video, because it's like 5-10 seconds in each segment as well, because there's just so many to go through.
Wait, wow. Okay. That is just amazing. I am so happy for that. Don't get us wrong, I've been happy for this episode. It's just I struggled to get to grips on how we could do the comparison. So I've just sat and watched clips of both of them to try and see if I could figure it out in my brain. Thank God Sam brought some notes, but we have managed to carry an hour and a half conversation over something I generally didn't think I would be able to do for 10 minutes. So
yeah,
well done us.
That's but I think that's what how it just works. Well, sometimes it is difficult to have that comparison, but I think it's something that I think a lot of people have been talking about, because a lot of people necessarily after season 8, and I know of a couple of people that haven't even bothered to watch House of the Dragon. And
well,
some people just need a little bit of yeah, definitely people need like a bit of a pep talk on it as well. But
yes,
everyone can make their own sort of comparisons. There's not much to compare, obviously, but there's similarities. But when you look deeper into it, like what I was saying about before about character emotions, you start then seeing more and more that are different, but also then similar to Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
There could be stuff in House of the Dragon that you love that was missing from Game of Thrones in your eyes. And again, that's what the podcast is about. It's the world of Game of Thrones through our own eyes.
Oh my God, that is so good. We'll just end it right there. That was so good. So poetic for a Thursday at nearly 9:45. Yes. So this has been episode 5.
I wrote 4 on my case card.
4? Question mark? 5? Question mark?
Question mark.
Thank you to everyone on Patreon who's watching us. Thank you, Lee, for always leaving a comment and just being so wonderful. Yes. You are absolutely great. Please remember the main podcast is live on YouTube, 7:30 every Sunday. We are also on Facebook, our community pages on Facebook. Our social medias are Instagram and TikTok, and we also play video games on Twitch. Sex, that was amazing. Loved it.
I think we've done good there for a Thursday evening, and when we've both settling on this is a great episode we're gonna have, and then we've both in our notes just gone, I have no idea what
I have no idea. But next week will not be the case. I promise you.
Yeah,
I promise you, you will see a side of me you will not like. So
we should do it like we did it with our top 5 from last week. Is that
just say them.
I'll get rid of any big ones. I won't go for big ones.
I might surprise you.
Ooh.
I may surprise you, but you'll have to tune in next week to find out. So thank you everyone for watching. Say thank you, Sam number 2.
Thank you very much. We always appreciate it, and so do I as well, because you just sat there listening to us rambling on, to be honest.
Yeah, you pretty much are, but thanks for letting us do it. Right. Stay nerdy, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.